Welcome to Level with Emily Reese. This is music by Tom Salta for Deathloop. He'll talk about the music in the game in a moment, but you might remember that the last time we had Tom Salta on the show, he talked about his masterclass series on writing music for games, and he's adding a class specifically about Deathloop. So if you want a discount code, get in touch with us through our Patreon page or on Twitter, and we'll get that for you. Anyway, here's Tom talking about the unique gameplay in Deathloop.
Deathloop is a really unique game where you wake up on you don't know what's going on. You just experience it through the point of view of the character that you play. And you end up on this mysterious island called Black Reef, which is caught in some kind of artificially created time loop based in the late 60s. Okay. And so you don't know what's going on, which is part of the humor in the dialogue. The Colt is the main character that you will play, and you are trying to figure out what's going on. And you find out that in order to break the loop, you have to eliminate within 24 hours 8 visionaries or targets before the day runs out. And if you either fail to do that or get killed, you start from the beginning. So it kind of reminded me when I first read about that, like of Majora's Mask, where there's this kind of thing. But this is way different. And in many ways, it's so much better because there is a danger to these kind of time looping games. It's like, oh man, that's going to get annoying and frustrating and repetitive. They somehow manage to just bypass all of the traps of these kind of time loop mechanisms, and it just comes together in this amazing game. The characters, the environment, everything is so colorful and animated and bigger than life and just fun. The experience is just amazing, and the game is truly outstanding, and I'm besides myself with joy of how good it came out, because I got to tell you, no one ever expects when they're working on something that it's going to be received this well. You can only hope.
What a fun era of music to harvest in that genre that,
Yeah.
I mean, just so many great instruments and vintage sounds and
yes,
fun kind of hat tips to the eras. So
yes,
I guess just talk about the choice of style and all that stuff. I mean, there's so many cool things to bring up. So
yeah. Oh man. Well, I mean, starting from the beginning was okay. The style, how do you even establish that? And that was probably one of the most challenging parts of the whole process, was to come up with this sound, this signature sound that would become the Deathloop sound. It's not just as simple as, grabbing late 60s music, averaging it together, and then, making a score.
Yeah.
I wish it was that easy. But the first step was really trying to figure out how to create the sound. So I will tell you, I mean, I always do my research, my R&D phase at the beginning. And in addition to the wonderfully comprehensive 50-page document that the audio director provided me, which is amazing, Michelle's super experienced at Arcane. There was a lot to go through and digest. And after I went through all of that and I listened to some of his thoughts and ideas and references, then I came up with my own list of about 44 different, musical references, because one of the things that I was most concerned about is how to come up with aggressive, satisfyingly aggressive, meaty, beefy fight music. If you just put on, late 60s playlist you're not going to hear a lot of mean-sounding stuff. You're not going to hear a lot of butt-kicking stuff. It's going to be like, an episode of Austin Powers.
Yeah.
Okay? That's the late 60s. Everyone's really happy and flying high.
Yeah.
And so, coming up with the sound that would allow me to evoke that period, but also be aggressive in a way that I could communicate retrospectively, but also with through a modern lens, that was the biggest challenge. So after I kind of did all of that research and my own references and his references, we had a lot of conversations. I'm like, what do you think about this? How about this? How about this? Then I started really taking, weeks to go through some of my favorites. I distilled it down to my favorite stuff that like kind of lit me up and felt like, okay, this could work, this could work, this could work. And I started making my own palette, if you will, kind of like Bob Ross makes, he put all the paints, we're going to use the cayenne white, and, and I would kind of come up with all these sounds and instruments that I felt would work together, perhaps. And then I started experimenting. And then the last part of the first phase was also trying to get my head around the kind of theme that he wanted.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you saw this yet, but there were actually 2 themes. The first theme that I composed that was approved enthusiastically by the team, that is something which ended up not being the theme. In fact, it's not in the game at all. So that's something that came up later. After I was working on the game, I didn't really have too much to go on. And the original idea was to create this mysterious piece of music, a very unique, mysterious piece of music to represent the island itself. Not necessarily, the characters on the island and the robust nature of the game, which wasn't apparent to me until later. So I created this mysterious theme that kind of evoked feelings of, mysterious island, and lost, those kind of things where it's, this eerie, mysterious thing. And I did it, and Michelle really liked it, and, I started working on some of the in-game music, like in the Upper City. And then I'm sitting with this, and I'm starting to get a little more captures from the game and a little more information, and I'm starting to see some more things of like people with masks and dancing and all this. I'm like, you know what? This just doesn't seem like the personality that I'm starting to see emerge here. If it needs something more, poppy, catchy, vibrant. And I couldn't help resist the temptation to really focus on something that would sound good looping for obvious reasons. Yeah. So without telling the audio director, I started working in the background on this new theme. And eventually I came up with these chords, these 4 chords in this 3-note motif, and developed that. And about a week later, I worked on it for about a week. I sent it over to him, and he was like, wow, thank you so much. This is great. I mean, I can't, I'm not going to replace the theme right now, but, I said, okay, here's why I think it would work better. I understand. Don't rush to any decisions. Sit with it. So he did that, and we had some conversations. About 3 weeks later, he came back and says, you're right. I really like this better. I think this is a better theme. And that became the foundation for the rest of the score.
Wow.
And that is the current theme to Deathloop.
So talk to me then about some of the instruments that you used, whether you used, the actual instruments themselves or if you're using replications of them. But I would just love to hear some of those like vintage sounds that you went for.
Yeah, absolutely. So back to that earlier phase when I was starting to really kind of make my list of ingredients.
Yeah.
Right, for the score, who's in the band. The things that came up were the Rhodes. Now, the Rhodes technically wasn't in the late 60s. It was like 1970 or something like that, whatever. But needless to say, it's still associated with that era. So the Rhodes, the clavinet, the vibraphone, the Wurlitzer, certain kind of like Abbey Road sounding drum kits, certain sounds, I was listening to those things, certain guitar tones. Certainly the whole way that music was affected. It's not just the instruments themselves, but also the way they're treated. The Hammond B3, the Mellotron, the theremin, as far as synthesizers. Right, yeah. The what was it, the VCS 3 or something like that? It was like an old late 60s synth. You hear it on some early Pink Floyd, I think Dark Side of the Moon, I'm not sure. Early Pink Floyd stuff, some more of the late psychedelic era Pink Floyd. So those kind of instruments. Now, I don't the only vintage instrument I have in this room that could arguably be from that era would be a Model D Mini Moog, even though that was 1971. But needless to say, I don't have any of those physical instruments here, so I used a lot of very good sounding virtualizations of those things and effects. That being said, I not only worked with some amazing guitar players, including Steve Ouimet, Roto, Chris Frost, but I also worked with my longtime friend, jazz legend, iconic producer, artist, Philippe Sace. Philippe is legendary, look him up. And so he's got physically a real Rhodes, he's got a real clavinet, he's got a real vibraphone, a real marimba, real Wurlitzer and stuff. So there are places in the score where I really wanted to get some serious solo work, stuff that's beyond my ability to even fake, to bring him in and show off and do some fun things. So when that was the case, I'm like, okay, man, Philippe, break it out, man, mic those babies up. And he did the real thing. He knows. Yeah. He studied that stuff. He knows exactly how to do it. Running the clavinet through the wah and the little distortion and whatever. And he even got his Steinway out and started doing some experimental stuff, in the strings. So basically 90% of everything you hear in there is intentionally a throwback to the late 60s. Now, to package it all up in a satisfying way, I approach the score not as if I'm trying to fool you that this is some uncovered score from the 60s, but rather it's a glorified lens of the way I see the 60s, more like I found this room locked up for 50 years that I kind of opened up, took the cobwebs off, and like, what can I do with this stuff?
Yeah.
And that's really kind of the way that I approached the score. And then, I took some liberties here and there, but it's very rare, So everything was really to kind of evoke that period, but through my own glorified lens.
It's just, again, fun is the word I keep coming up with, because it really is just fun. And there's like kind of film noir-y, kind of spy, like it reminded me sometimes of like the Mission Impossible, the original Mission Impossible TV show.
Right, the 60s Mission Impossible.
Yep, all that stuff.
The 60s James Bond, there's the 60s Caped Crusaders on TV, definitely all that stuff.
Yeah,
all that it never takes itself seriously, but it still isn't funny music. It's just fun because of the context that it's used in.
some of the individual tracks I want to talk about, and I promise we're not going to talk about every single boss, but we're going to talk about...
Well, that's okay. I got my water and honey here. So go ahead.
I mean, just starting right with Alexis, in order of the soundtrack.
Yes.
That's the one with alto sax and vibes. And, vibes are in many more tracks than just the Alexis track, but the alto sax, really stands out because it's featured so prominently in that track.
Yes.
So talk to me about that.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. So this is hilarious. I have to tell you a story about Alexis. Alexis was the first target or visionary that I did music for.
Okay.
All right. I went down the list. And for each target, I got a little concept art drawing of their body and their face. And then a paragraph about them, like in a little bit, of anecdotes about them. And then a description of 5 words. Right?
Okay.
So Alexis, when I read this back in 2020, I started this in January 2020. This is the description I got. An outspoken man-child with an inflated ego. He's perhaps the most immature of all the program founders. As a young billionaire, he's the single largest financial investor. Okay, so I'm like, okay. And his personality is outspoken, immature, decadent, ignorant, and vain. I'm like, are they like watching our presidential elections or something? What's happening here? No, anyway, so all these characters had these very animated, exaggerated, unique personalities. And one of the suggestions was to kind of use some of the movie jazz, swing bandy kind of whatever, that kind of color. And, when I read that personality, I'm thinking, okay, we got to make it kind of sound like arrogant and pretentious, and very foofy and like, wear your jacket and tie as you come and sit in our jazz lounge, And then I called upon David Mann, amazing saxophonist for anyone that's into jazz and smooth jazz and stuff. I met him back in the 90s. So between him and Philippe Sace, I would create the music. I'd, create the foundations and the main melodies and stuff. And then I would hand it off to the cats. And I'm like, okay, man, here you go. Now go riff, do this, do that, And so that was how Alexis Dorsey came together.
So funny and fun, especially when because these tracks are structured. The tracks for the targets are structured with more ambi, chill music to start, and then the battle. I assume is how these are.
Right. So the way that the targets are structured is very much similar to the way that all of the map area music is structured. So when you listen to the soundtrack, which will be released at some point, hopefully very soon, it starts with more ambient music, and that is what we call the approach music. So in the case of the targets, that's when you're kind of, you're coming in on the target, you're entering their region, their area, you're in proximity, but you're undetected. And then eventually it kicks into the fight stuff. And you'll hear that exploration music go on for a while, that approach exploration, depending on what area, if you're doing a map versus a target. It goes on for quite a while. And the reason is because it comes back to the same 2-minute or so piece of music 4 different times of day.
Okay.
Which was really interesting. So it allowed me to create these variations, or it required me to create these variations of the same piece of music. So you might hear it start with these very gentle kind of like tremolo strings, which represents, maybe, midnight, like the moon is out and, just quiet. everything's dark. And then after that, you might hear it feel like it's starting to wake up. That's the morning. And then it goes into the afternoon. And then you might hear people, maybe a little drum, a little bass come in. And then the third variation would be like the afternoon, and the little groove comes in. And then when it comes to evening, that's when the most energy is present, because that's when the island wakes up and they have this party and carnivals and all that stuff. And then it gets into the fight music. And then the last stage, the way that Arcane structured all of the music is that there's also what we call an escape section, which means like when you're now done with the shooting and you're kind of trying to escape or run away, not engage, you get out of there. And so the music becomes a little bit more like, ooh, tiptoe, like, what, quick, let me get out of here, let me get out of here. And it becomes less violent, but still very fast-paced and a little frantic.
Yeah. No, that's a really cool structure to them. And with that Target Alexis track, it's like then it kind of gets like rock saxophone, which really is quite. I mean, I don't mean to disparage your friends, but it's kind of douchey, and I love that, hearing like the description of the character and then that juxtaposed with the music. It's really brilliant.
That's absolutely the idea. I mean, we had all these ingredients, and the fun challenge was, how can I take all this stuff swimming in my head and kind of present it in a way that felt satisfying and appropriate for this wonderful, unique, crazy place in Deathloop.
So I take it was your friend, you said Philippe, yeah.
Philippe Sace, yeah. He's one of
your friend Philippe on Target Charlie with the vibes and the marimba and just all the mallet work. That stuff is so fun.
Yes. All of the mallet work, particularly the mallet work that really requires some serious, crazy, performance skills. He would do, complete live marimba and, a lot of the treatments and he's playing with two hands with two mallets in each hand and doing crazy stuff. I mean, unbelievably talented. So yeah, and it really gives an authentic feel. I also have I have a set of Jenko vibes right here that belong to my father-in-law. Oh. And so once in a while, when it was something that, just a few notes here and there or the melody and stuff, I'm like, here it is, boom, and I'd mic that up. Plus, I have tons of amazing, mallets and vibraphones virtually as well. So, I just jumped around, equal opportunity employer to all kinds of things.
Yeah, and that track, then the Target Charlie track, kind of has this big band that kicks in with it too, which
the
is
swing
really
band.
Yeah. Super fun.
Was the Nelson Riddle inspired, like Batman climbing up the side of the building, having conversations with people who stick their heads out. Listening back to those kind of things, those episodes on YouTube, that just brought back so many fun memories of me having chocolate chip cookies after school, waiting for, come on. When we last left Batman, he was holy, whatever, Batman. So that style was what inspired that, and all those fun chords, hitting, punching, bam, 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 bam. A lot of very similar style chords. So that was the foundation for that. And that was all like swing band. And then also, if you hear it, it gets really nuts at the end. It really shows off some serious skill, and that's also where I invited Philippe to say, "Come on, man, do your thing." I mean, because he's been doing horn arrangements and string arrangements his whole career.
Wow.
I mean, he goes back to Shaka Khan, and he's ridiculous. So he gets to show off a little bit there too. That was so much fun.
So was the theremin real then, or was the theremin keyboard?
I wish.
Yeah.
I wish it was real. Yeah. No. You're going to love this. So I'm going to play you the theremin right here. It's an app on my phone.
No.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's a little app on my phone, and it's like this little happy little robot. And I basically just plugged my phone in, the headphone into my audio interface, and did it that way. So, yeah, I was like, let me put the volume up here. Ready? Yeah, so that was...
I love that.
Oh, man. So I had a lot of fun with that. Just a little sine wave. And then, then I throw it some fun effects and things to vintagify it. That's my own word. Yeah, and that's how it works.
I loved the slide blues. You got a little slide blues guitar in there as well. Just really grungy. Yeah. That was fantastic.
Oh yeah, the slide blues stuff, that was generally real. The real slide blues. I had Roto down in Nashville doing some of that stuff. Steve Ouimet, he did a lot. I'm not sure if he did. I don't think he did slide. I forget. And then Chris Frost also did some craziness. So I tapped into a lot of different people at different times for different reasons. Believe it or not, there's so much of the guitar in there that's actually virtual guitar, and some of it isn't even trying to be guitar, it just sounds like it. I discovered that, when I throw the clavinet through some really good signal chains and amps and stuff, man, it sounds just like a guitar. It really does. It's amazing. There was this guy when I was doing my research, Loki Doley. I think he's Australian. Crazy happy dude who loves to play the blues and stuff, and he's on the stage in these concerts, and he's made this custom clavinet with a whammy bar on it. And he puts it through this distortion stuff, and he's playing a and I'm like listening. I'm like, wait, this doesn't match what I'm seeing. This sounds like a guitar. So that gave me a hint. Like, I could do that, sort of. I have a pitch wheel, and So, wherever possible, because I'm the composer, but I'm not a guitarist, finding ways to create guitar textures that were satisfying to perform and play and create with was part of my mission. So about half of what you hear is not even real guitar, but it kind of evokes the same feeling. But it also added to the unique sound I created because, I'm not a guitarist, so it doesn't sound like normal stuff all the time.
Yeah.
It sounds different.
Most of the music really does have that fun vibe, really upbeat. Even the lead-in music as you're, scoping out the joint, trying to find the target. Even that music is, I wouldn't call it sad or dark or anything like that. More mysterious maybe, but then, you kind of listen through the whole soundtrack and then you get to this track called The Wharf. And that tune to me was really melancholic, and so I just kind of want to know the story about that since I haven't played the game and I don't know the area or the reference. So what was that about?
So the Wharf is one of the 4 main areas that I created a musical suite for. Right, a musical suite being the full spectrum, everything from exploration music all the way through fight and escape and all that stuff. And also 4 times of day worth of that stuff as well. Yeah. And I think one of the challenges in Deathloop, given that all of these areas are on the same island, and, they do have some distinct differences, but not immediately obvious. It's not like some of the other games where it's like, okay, this is the snow level and this is the lava level. And, this was like, okay, well, here's some rocky island and here's some more rock stuff and here's some inside buildings and here's some outside buildings. And, it wasn't as distinctly different. So wherever possible, I really wanted to exaggerate those differences. And I depended a lot on the audio director to kind of tell me what could make these areas unique. How can we musically make them unique? So, what is going to be the most dismal of all of them? And the Wharf was that. The Wharf, as it sounds, is an area that's lower with the water, and you figure like foggy perhaps, and, very dull looking and what have you. So, if it was an opportunity to make it as dark and dismal and hopeless sounding as I could, then I took it because I knew we wouldn't have that chance very often to do something like that. So that's where it started. And then, of course, I had to keep in mind, how do I continue that flow through the different times of day as it wakes up? So probably the most dismal is going to be midnight on the Wharf, right? Because it's like pitch black and you're down there, by yourself in this foggy, watery wharf area. So, that was the thinking that would go into these areas based on a lot of the information I would get.
Also, there are just a couple of spots where I really prominently heard vocals. So yes. I'd love to have you talk about those moments, because those clearly were decisions, like special decisions to bring in vocals.
Yes, absolutely. So if you hear a female vocalist in there, you're hearing Airily Brighton. Okay.
Oh yeah,
the,
she's
the,
great.
the one and only Airily, made famous in Ori and the Blind Forest, right?
Yep.
So I've worked with her for many years. She's wonderful, and she had the perfect texture and range and sound for what I was going for, in this, to kind of give it that, James Bondy feel, that kind of thing. So.
Yeah.
So she first, appears in the main theme. And because the antagonist in this game is Juliana, right? You have Colt, and Juliana is the one that's trying to work against him, and she's the one that you have all this, this banter with during the whole game, which is hilarious. Anytime that there was something Juliana oriented, you would hear that voice come in. There was one exception to that. One of the characters was also a female character. Well, more than one. But Fia was one of the targets.
Yeah.
And her vibe, her deal was that she was like this hopeless romantic. I'm going back to the document here. She was a student in psychology and a drug smuggler. And her interest in parapsychology, right? So at some point she got addicted to drugs, and so she'd hallucinate a lot. So you have this kind of hopeless romantic, chick who's always high and hallucinating. And I'm like, okay, this could be cool to kind of use the voice and bring it back to Airly's voice. But instead of having her do some new part, what I did is I went back to some of the parts that Airly sang in the theme, and I just chopped them and played with them and turned them around in reverse and threw them through reverse echoes and reverse reverbs and little phrases. And so you hear all this, and it just would tail off, and it just sounds like trippy, man. Like, yeah. Those are some good shrooms. So I mean, that was the feeling I wanted to evoke, and that also allowed me to bring back the female voice there.
Wrote a lot of music pretty fast. I mean, a little more than a year you had on it.
Yeah. Well, I worked on this for about 6 months. I started in January 2020 and I ended in June 2020. Okay. Wow. So I've been done with this for over a year. I mean, it just came out now, but I've been done with this a long time. And so I do tend to work fast when I can. Oftentimes, I have to kind of go at the pace that the development team is working at. If I come in at a point where things are really still in development and being formed, so I will do the game music first, and usually I'll do the cutscenes last. Deathloop didn't have too many cutscenes, but that was the last stuff I did, along with the menu music. And once again, the menu music is going to be based on the theme, so it gave me an opportunity to extend that main theme. And I hope the soundtrack will have it, but it gives you the splash screen music. It gives you the 4 time of day variations of the main theme. And then it gives you a Juliana variation and a Colt variation. Colt's variation has more of that low guitar, bang, 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 and Juliana has more of Airly's voice. And it has that melody. I mean, man, that theme is all over the place.
Yeah.
But I'm so relieved to say that apparently it's not monotonous.
No.
And I haven't had this much fun, going back to some of the kind of music that I enjoy producing since Red Steel. I mean, that score was not traditional either. There was a lot of like jam groove oriented with drums and solos and and I hear that there's going to be an anniversary release of that because it's been, can you believe it, 15 years? Yeah, so that's going to be coming out again. That'll be fun if any of your listeners haven't heard that. So if you want to hear a score that really is very different and varied and just also has a lot of fun, that's another one. And this experience has kind of reminded me a little of that because I'm like, oh man, I love just being able to step away from just doing traditional scoring and hybrid scoring and just to have fun making riffs and going into just regular music production and drums and solo, all that kind of stuff and bass lines, so it was a blast.
Last time we talked, it was about your series of masterclasses or your masterclass that you have online. And so I'd love to just check in with you on that really quick. And then, from what I understand, you have a Deathloop one. So chat with us about your masterclass.
No, thanks. So, last time we spoke, I was talking to you about Game Music Essentials, which is basically a crash course for anybody who's interested or seriously pursuing game music. And it basically takes decades of my experience and the lectures I've given and consolidates it down into like a 3-hour course. So if you can't make it out to a conference or a university where I would go through these courses, it covers everything from my creative process to the concepts of it all the way through the business sides. I mean, that's why I call it Game Music Essentials. It's kind of like, this is what you need to know. And I got a lot of positive feedback from that, and also a lot of requests for, okay, this is fantastic, but now I'd love to hear about this and this and that. So that gave me the idea while I was working on Deathloop to kind of record and document a lot of this. And what I did was I found that the most important things that people want to learn about that you don't hear about so much is, can you literally hold my hand and walk me through how you do something from beginning to end? Like, show me the reference music, show me the sandboxing that you do, show me the sound creations that you do, show me the early ideas, show me how you read a document, how you interpret it, how you plan it out, how do you break the music up. So I literally use Deathloop from beginning to end, and it's a very comprehensive course. I'm not even sure how many hours it is, but it's going to be available very, very soon, and I will offer your listeners a discount code. But it literally, if you want to know, if it's kind of like sitting with me in the studio during the months that I was working on it, it goes from everything from the beginning all the way to how I name files and deliver them to the client. So, I mean, it's a rare opportunity to really get a very detailed account of how to do it. So I thought that would be fun and exciting to offer to the public. It's going to be called Scoring AAA Deathloop Edition.
And where's the website again?
So the main website is tomsalta.com/masterclass. That is the home of all of the courses right now, Game Music Essentials, and soon this Deathloop one.
Thank you for writing it, and thanks for talking to me about it. I loved it.
My pleasure. It was so amazing, again, to talk to you, Emily. I look forward to all of our interviews. This was so much fun.
Thanks for listening to Level with Emily Reese. You can learn more about Tom Salta and see a playlist at patreon.com/level. I'm Emily Reese. Sam Keenan is our producer. Say hi, Sam.
Hi.
You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Level with Emily and learn more about us at levelwithemily.com, made possible by Adam Selvage at Tiki Web Services. Composer Brad Gentle does our YouTube channel. Level with Emily Reese is a production of June Media, Inc.